In today's episode, the digital self and the modern identity architecture. You're tuning into Human Architecture Assessment, a structural evaluation of how humans and the systems around us exist and their implications. I'm your host, JAPEXJESS. You've seen it. Someone sets up their camera, tears streaming, and talks through every detail of a breakup that happened this morning. Clicks post. Or the person who fires off a response video, vile, tone deaf, aimed at someone else's lowest moment. And when the backlash comes, their defense is, I didn't think it would go viral. I thought only my close friends would see it. You didn't share it to the group chat. You posted it on a platform with a follower count and a publish button. What allowed you to truly believe that was private? Only your close friends would see it, really? They thought they were in their bedroom. They were standing in a stadium. In this technological age, a person's full identity is a combination of their physical self and their digital self. Two selves, one architecture. And the people who understand that are accessing rooms, opportunities, and relationships that the people who don't will never reach. Visibility, managed deliberately, is one of your greatest defenses. There used to be a wall between the bedroom and the stadium. Getting to the stadium required intention. You had to show up, get dressed, stand in front of people. The friction was the filter. Most private thoughts stayed private, not because people were disciplined, but because broadcasting them required effort most people never made. That effort has a specific weight to it. Most people will never speak on a stage or stand in front of a packed stadium, but they know the weight of sitting across from someone and sharing something vulnerable. The way the other person's silence lands. The way their face shifts before they respond. The exposure is embodied. The other person is present to you and you to them. And the intimacy has gravity because both of you are in it. Standing in front of a crowd carries the same weight, amplified. The visibility is total. There is nowhere to retreat. The vulnerability is witnessed in real time. The camera in the bedroom removes that weight entirely. You are alone. The audience exists in theory, but not in presence. You can pause, edit, delete, repost. The vulnerability gets performed into a void and called intimacy. The effort feels private because the room is private, but the reach is public. And the gap between how it feels and what it is, that gap is where the confusion lives. The internet didn't create the stadium. The stadium has always been there. What the internet did was remove the wall and replace the weight with the illusion of a bedroom. The feeling is the lie. Researchers gave this a name. Media scholar Michael Wesch called it context collapse. The moment when your audience stops being people you know and becomes everyone. In his words, context collapse is not a lack of context. It is an infinite number of contexts collapsing upon one another into that single moment of recording. The bedroom didn't become private, it became all rooms at once. The moment you create a profile, build a following, and press publish, you're in the stadium. The stadium doesn't care how many people are in the seats today. The infrastructure is live. The record is running. The seats are there. Most people understand this intellectually. Also, most people haven't internalized it emotionally. And the gap between intellectual understanding and emotional internalization is where every bad post lives. 3 main positions, and the one you're in determines everything about what the digital self builds or costs. The first position is documentation. The person in the documentation position is doing the work on themselves. Developing, refining, becoming. The digital self simply catches what is already there. The camera is a witness, not a manufacturer. For example, putting on a dress because of how it makes you feel and how it makes you look. The heels and accessories, all intentional. The camera happened to capture it after the fact. When the physical self walks into a room, the digital self has already been there, and everything it communicated was true because it was sourced from the physical self that earned it. The meet and greet for the documentation person is a confirmation. The audience doesn't feel deceived, they feel met. The person they followed is the person standing in front of them. That's not luck, that's architecture. The second position is amplification. The amplification position is the honest middle ground. The digital self is a polished version of the physical self. Same person, better framing. The gap is real, but it's sustainable. It's the difference between your best self and your average self. Well, assuming that your average self is not polished. I mean, like, for most people, average day to day, they might wear jeans and a t-shirt, something like that. But then if they had to go to a wedding, then they'll put on the dress shirt and dress shoes. The point being, the physical self can close this gap on a good day. It's not a difference between character and a person. Most people operating with intention live here, and there's nothing wrong with it. The third position is fiction. The fiction position is where the work goes into the camera, not into the person. The digital self is a construction. The persona is more extroverted, more confident, more interesting, more composed than the physical self has ever been. Every post adds to the debt. Every follower is a creditor. And the meet and greet is the margin call. The influencers who got dragged at meet and greets over the past few months didn't fail because their digital self was more extroverted than their physical self. They failed because the extroversion was never real. It was a production choice, not a personal quality. The camera didn't document an extroverted person. The camera manufactured one. Now, not everyone performing a version of themselves they haven't fully become is running a debt they can't pay. Some people use the digital self as a target, the person they are committed to becoming, posted publicly as a form of accountability. The digital self pulls the physical self towards it. The gap closes over time because the direction of effort is still inward. The work is still happening on the person, not just on the presentation. The distinction is whether the digital self is a model or a substitute. A model for who you're becoming is a compass. A substitute for who you're not is a debt. The difference shows up at the meet and greet. The model person is closing the gap every day. The substitute person is widening it. The key distinction across all three main positions is not how big the gap is. It's where the effort is directed. Documentation and transformation both require work on the person. Fiction requires work only on the presentation. You can feel the difference when you meet someone in any of these positions. Now, there is another position, the abstention position. Present in the technological world, consuming, scrolling, participating, but intentionally absent from building a digital self. No personal brand, minimal presence, control to the point of invisibility. The reasoning sounds rational, and to the people in it, feels like a principled choice. Why give platforms your data? Why expose yourself to scrutiny? Why perform for an audience? Privacy is protection. Absence is safety. It isn't. The absence of a digital self is not neutrality. It's a vacancy. And vacancies get filled. A Google result someone else wrote, a LinkedIn profile assembled from fragments you didn't curate, a narrative built from the last thing you posted 3 years ago or from what other people have said about you. The person who refuses to author their digital self doesn't escape having one. They just lose authorship of it. A 2017 Career Builder survey of over 2,000 hiring managers found that 57%, Tunde sa, 57% are less likely to call someone in for an interview if they can't find them online. And that's 2017. How much more is this true in 2026? Come on now. Not because the absence proves something bad, because the absence proves nothing at all. And nothing is not neutrality. Nothing is a vacancy. In a world where the digital self is part of the full identity architecture, abstaining from it is the equivalent of showing up to every opportunity with half your credentials missing. The room already knows something about you before you arrive. The question is whether you put it there or someone else did. Deliberate, intentional visibility, the kind that tells the rooms who you are before anyone else gets to decide, is one of your greatest defenses. Not performance, not oversharing, authorship. The digital self works while the physical self sleeps. Every position I've held came through recruitment. The room already knew me before I walked in. Recruiters found a profile at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Collaborators who read a post 3 years ago and remembered it when an opportunity opened. Decision makers who knew the answer before the interview started because the digital self had already made the case. But the physical self still has to show up. And when it does, the question the room is asking, whether consciously or not, is, are these the same person? The digital self opens the door. The physical self has to walk through it with the same authority that opened it. When those two things are aligned, the physical self is the source material the digital self draws from. The room doesn't just accept you, it confirms you. The credibility was already there. The physical self just made it three-dimensional. And when they aren't aligned, the room feels it before anyone else names it. Something is slightly off. The energy doesn't match. The confidence that read as natural online reads as performed in person. Nobody says anything, but the room knows. Now, building a deliberate digital self does not fully protect you. There is a variable outside your control that operates on your digital self the same way it operates on your physical self. Other people's biases. The digital self is not just what you build, it's also what people read into what you build. And people read through the filter of everything they already believe, everything they've already decided, and everything they want to be true about who you are. You enjoy smiling. You like color. Your digital presence is warm, expressive, visually alive. Before a colleague meets you in person, they've already assembled an expectation. Warmth means access. Smiling means open door. Color means extroversion. They've simplified your being into a set of assumptions, and those assumptions come with an expectation of behavior. And then you don't deliver on the expectation. Not because you misrepresented yourself, because smiling and color do not equal unlimited access to another person. Warmth is not the same as availability. Expressiveness online is not the same as extroversion in every room. Now you're disingenuous. At least that's the read. The person who built a story about you from your digital self feels the story was wrong. And rather than examining their own assumptions, they examine your presentation. You posted the smile. You chose the colors. You created the impression. What did you expect? This is the burden the digital self carries that the physical self navigates differently. In person, nuance reads in real time. A warm person who sets a boundary communicates it through tone, timing, body language. The full embodied signal arrives together. Online, the warm posts accumulate, and the boundary post has to work against the weight of every smile that came before it. The same mechanism runs in the other direction. Post about excellence consistently, And a colleague who hasn't met you may already decide you're arrogant before you've said a word to them. Post about discipline and someone reads it as judgment of their lack of it. Post about success and someone reads it as performance. The digital self is not just received, it's interpreted. And the interpretation runs through filters you didn't design and cannot fully see. Princeton psychologist Susan Fiss has spent decades studying how people perceive others across two dimensions, warmth and competence. Her research and a 2013 follow-up by Holian and Fiss found that people perceive these two qualities as inversely related. When someone scores high on one, the assumption is they score lower on the other. But the sharper finding is this: people know the trade-off exists and actively manage it. They downplay their warmth to appear more competent. They downplay their competence to appear warmer. The smiling and colors read isn't a mistake the audience is making by accident. It's a bias wired into the architecture of how people evaluate each other. And your digital self is being run through that architecture every time someone encounters it. You cannot eliminate this. Now, what you can do is build with enough precision and consistency that the projection has less room to take hold. The more clearly the digital self communicates who you are, not just the highlights, but the fuller picture, the less space there is for who you are not. It doesn't close the gap entirely, but it does narrow it. The projection problem is not a reason to stop building. It's a reason to build more deliberately, with more dimension, with enough range that the person encountering your digital self gets closer to the actual architecture rather than the simplified version their biases want to hand them. Full identity in the technological age isn't physical or digital. It's physical and digital, both simultaneously. One without the other is an incomplete architecture. The physical self is who you are when no one's watching. The decisions you make at 2 a.m. when the camera's off. The standard you hold yourself to when there's no audience. When it's 6 a.m. and you're at the gym, you're jumping rope, and before you started, you said you jump rope for 30 minutes. Now it's 10 minutes in and you're really tired, like exhausted. There's no one around you. But here's the question. Do you stop and give yourself a pass? Give yourself grace? Or do you commit and keep going? I'm exhausted, I'm tired. Okay. And the goal is 30 minutes. We've not reached, and so we cannot yet stop. Sure, maybe we'll go a little bit slower, but there's no one else around. So, in that moment, are you going to hold yourself to the standard? Are you going to do the thing that you said you would do? You're the only person who knows about this work. Are you going to still put it in? Put it in. The digital self is the record of that person reaching into the world. The rooms you enter before you arrive, the reputation that precedes you, the narrative that exists whether you authored it or not. The documentation position is where these two selves compound each other. The physical self develops, the digital self witnesses it, and the two become mutually reinforcing. The physical self builds credibility. The digital self broadcasts it. The digital self opens rooms. The physical self fills them. The sociologist Erving Goffman spent his career showing that identity has never been singular. In his 1959 work, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, he argued that we've always performed different versions of ourselves in different rooms, at work, at home, with strangers, with friends, and family. The performance shifts by context. What the digital self changed is not the existence of the performance. It removed the walls between the rooms. It made the recording permanent. The backstage became front stage. The ephemeral became searchable. And the audience stopped being the people present in the room and became everyone who would ever look. The participation trophy generation was told the performance was enough. When that generation gets a platform, the natural move is to perform on it. The digital self becomes the participation trophy, a reward for showing up, not for becoming. The counter to that isn't less digital, it's more physical. Do the work on the person. Let the camera document it. Build both selves from the same source material. Control your narrative or have others control it for you. That isn't a social media tip. That's the operating principle of identity in the technological age. The person who abstains thinking they're protected is ceding authorship of their own story. The person running the fishing gap is borrowing on credit they don't have. The person doing the work on the physical self, on the digital self, and the alignment between the two is the only one building an architecture that compounds. The rooms you want to be in already have a version of you in them. The version assembled from search results, old posts, and other people's accounts of who you are, other people's projections of who they decided you must be. The question is whether the version that reaches those rooms first is the one you built or the one that got built for you. Your full identity is both, physical and digital, one architecture. The people who understand that aren't just more visible, they're more protected, better positioned, and more prepared for the rooms they haven't entered yet. The wall between the bedroom and the stadium is gone. It isn't coming back. Build accordingly. That's it for this episode. And remember, people make excuses for what they want. What do your excuses reveal?